everyone, this is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 257 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
And I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
Thank you. I appreciate your concern week in, week out. It's touching.
It is. I'm always concerned.
It's touching to you, too, that you have that level of concern?
It's touching to myself.
Okay, that might have come out wrong, but we'll go with it. Hey, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Leslie.
Hey, Leslie.
Carla Winston.
What's up, Winston?
Lucas Dollins.
Hey, Lucas.
Fanny.
Hey, what about Fanny?
Don Korn.
Hey, Don.
Amber Bray.
Thank you, Amber.
Malin Bjornberg.
Ooh, Bjornborg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dickie Darts.
What's up, Dickie?
That's one that really cracked you up on Patreon.
It really did.
Sabrina Catley.
Hey, Sabrina.
Lola Damron.
Hey, Lola.
Diana.
Appreciate that, Diana.
Sarah C.
What's up, Sarah?
Annie with an E.
Well, I'm glad Annie's got an E.
Jacqueline Davis.
Hey, Jacqueline.
Donna Wren.
What's going on, Donna?
Melissa Mays.
Hey, Mays.
And last but not least, Jessica Davis.
Well, thank you, Jessica.
And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Astra Berry.
Yeah, hey, Astra.
So, longtime supporter. We appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had PayPal donations from Jennifer Warmuth.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Christy Della Cerda.
Della Sota.
And Janet Lamb.
Thank you, Janet.
So, thanks to everyone. Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on Billy Justin Charles. We're headed to Utah in 1996. Billy's fiance, Jamie Weiss, was found dead in her bathtub. And then 11 years later, they convicted Billy of the murder. But it's a strange case. He filed an appeal, which contained some things that really kind of muddied the waters.
Sure.
And I don't want to give it away, but we go from there.
Yeah.
But it's a good episode. Make sure you check it out.
Definitely check it out.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Hey, I'm ready.
We are talking about the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. This is a pretty famous or infamous unsolved case. It was on Labor Day weekend of 1982 that 12-year-old Johnny Gosch disappeared from West Des Moines, Iowa. He was last seen collecting newspapers for his paper route from a paper drop in the early morning, but Johnny never finished the route and he never made it back home. Sadly, when Johnny disappeared, there were no legal requirements compelling law enforcement to search for children as soon as they were reported missing. There was no such thing as an Amber Alert back then. Johnny was famously among the first of what became known as milk carton kids, with his case inspiring the launch of an iconic campaign by the dairy industry.
Man, I remember those.
Yeah, pictures and information about missing children were featured on milk cartons, hoping that the public could help. I remember them very clearly. You know, you felt bad because you knew these were kids, maybe around your age, that were missing. Now, was the information designed for you as a child? Maybe. Maybe you would see this kid. Was it designed for adults, or was it just designed for everyone? I think the bottom line is it was a very good initiative, because you think of it, besides the nutritional facts of milk, which I think most people know, what those are. Milk's pretty good for you. What else are you using that space for?
Just marketing. So why not put something useful on it?
Yeah, right. Over the years, there have been some intriguing twists and turns in this case that have led to a lot of theories. This is a case, Gibbs, that's followed by many, many people online. There are a plethora of theories regarding this case. Johnny's mother maintains her son was abducted by a national ring of powerful sex traffickers, but he is still alive. This is what she believes. Other information in the case points to the potential existence of a local pedophile network in Des Moines, believed to have been active around the time that Johnny disappeared. Amidst these developments, unfortunately, Johnny's parents have been targeted by scammers looking to profit off of their grief and pain.
We see that a lot in these cases as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not as much about the profiting. I think, very often we see people calling in hoaxes or, messing with the families of victims. This is pretty despicable in its own right, trying to profit off of the misery of others. But despite all of the speculative theories, Johnny remains missing to this day. And while the case is officially cold, it's still open, despite the number of years that have passed without any significant breakthroughs. And, really, Gibbs, I think no matter what theory you believe, there's no question that Johnny's case has been the catalyst for legislative reform and a significant overhaul in investigative protocols regarding missing and abducted children in the U.S. It really is kind of a landmark type case.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can think of a handful of cases that really changed how things are looked at.
Or how things are done.
Or how they're done.
Kind of spurred, a good amount of change.
Right.
John David Gosch, known as Johnny, was born on November 12, 1969 in Des Moines to his parents, John Sr. and Noreen. He had two older half-siblings from Noreen's first marriage. He went to Crossroads Park Elementary and was a caring, considerate, responsible child who, as a youngster, joined the Boy Scouts and loved attending the Iowa State Fair.
Love the Boy Scouts, man. Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, it was a lot of fun.
So you were big into that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed those. That's where I learned how to use my first knife.
Well, that's scary, but we'll just skip over that. I myself was never in the Boy Scouts, and it might have been the outfit for me, the uniform.
Yeah.
I played sports. I was okay with those uniforms, but for some reason, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, that uniform just never grabbed me.
Well, I always liked the uniform.
When Johnny was 11 years old, he got a paper route delivering the Des Moines Register newspaper to help save up some money. His dad usually went with him to help him out. And pretty soon, according to CNN, he saved up enough money to buy a dirt bike.
Hey, I loved my paper route when I had mine. Now, my dad never got up early to help me out.
Yeah.
But I definitely loved my paper route and put away some good change.
Well, you got to respect a kid like Johnny or someone like you who is willing to work from a young age. I started working when I was like 12 or 13. I never did paper routes, but I had a lot of like landscaping jobs and grass mowing and things like that. You really got to respect that kind of drive, that initiative at a young age. I don't know if we're seeing as much of that these days. I'll tell you what, over the winter, Gibbs, I don't think I had a single kid come to my house offering to shovel my driveway. And that might be the first year that I can remember that not happening.
Oh, man, I feel you. You just can't find anybody to do it. You're like, what happened to kids wanting to make a quick $20 or something?
Right. Now, we didn't have a ton of snow, but we had some days where we had some snow. And every year, I'd have to turn down multiple people.
Yeah. But it's the same way with grass cutting now. You can't find a kid to cut their grass.
Some of them don't know how. They've never cut their own grass.
Well, there's the problem.
On September 5th, 1982, Johnny woke up and left home before dawn to head off on his paper route. This wasn't something he was supposed to do. According to the Charlie Project, just the day before, Johnny asked to do his route alone, but his parents said no. On this morning, Johnny chose not to wake his dad. Instead, he took the family dachshund, Gretchen, along with him for company. I love dachshunds, man. My first dog when I was a kid was a dachshund. Her name was Pepper.
Pepper.
Dachshunds are great.
Yeah.
Sometime before 6 a.m., with his yellow carrier bag over his shoulder and his red paper wagon in tow, Johnny arrived at the paper drop at 42nd Street and Marquardt Lane in West Des Moines to collect his newspapers. Other paper boys who had routes that morning saw Johnny at the paper drop. But even before 6 a.m., customers along Johnny's paper route started calling the Gosch home. They told John and Noreen that they hadn't received their paper, and they weren't sure if something had happened to Johnny because he was never late.
Oh, man, when those customers call, because I remember a few times I missed getting some deliveries out, people want their paper.
Well, and I get it, definitely in 1982, right? You couldn't pull up your iPad or your phone and pull up an app that would give you your news. You kind of needed that paper to know what was going on. And people were just used to it. They liked to drink coffee and read the paper. My question is, so these people had your home number?
Yeah, so you handed your customer an envelope so they can pay you and also tip you. And on that envelope had your telephone number.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was another reason why I would not have wanted to be a paper boy.
Yeah.
At first, John Sr. thought his son may have overslept. But when he went to check, he found that Johnny's bed was empty. So he headed out to search the neighborhood. Only 2 blocks from their home, he made a concerning discovery. Johnny's red wagon was full of newspapers, but there was no sign of his son anywhere. Gretchen, meanwhile, had managed to safely find her way home without Johnny. So a panicked John and Noreen called the West Des Moines Police Department around 8:30 a.m. to report their son missing. The local police didn't seem to be too concerned. Noreen has claimed that officers didn't come around to the house to take a full report for around 45 minutes after she called. When Johnny disappeared, law enforcement didn't treat missing children cases with the appropriate urgency that they do now. This is something, Gibbs, that we've talked about time and time again.
We really have. As
far as the police were concerned, there was no solid evidence that Johnny had been abducted. There was no ransom note or anything like that. Under Iowa state law, at the time, John and Noreen had to wait an agonizing 72 hours until Johnny could officially be classified as a missing person. And Gibbs, let's keep in mind, this kid was 12 years old. If today a parent called the police and said, my 12-year-old is missing, there would be a much different response. You would sure hope, and in most cases there would be.
I would assume there would be.
Well, police just take those types of calls much more seriously than they did, 40 years ago. There's just no doubt about it. After the police came to the house, John Sr. and Noreen wouldn't hear from them for another 8 hours. When they did, they were told the FBI wasn't getting involved because there was no evidence that Johnny was in danger. To make things even more frustrating, the chief of police didn't even want the FBI's help. So again, this is something that I know I've said many times. When a local police department has the opportunity to call in the FBI or other types of big time help, why would they not do it?
Yeah, you should be wanting to work with all agencies. But back then, there was a lot of that. We don't need any other agency's help. We've got this. This is our area.
Yeah, I do think quite often it was viewed as weak, or maybe there's a better word for it, but like we can't take care of our own population.
Yeah, this is our backyard. We got it.
Yeah.
We don't need your help.
And I think that's why when we do a case and, the FBI is called in very early, or, a bunch of agencies are called in early, I always applaud it, because I think back to cases like this where you've got a police department who just wanted to tackle it on their own. And could they do it? Yeah, probably. Maybe. But would it be better to have as much help as you can get? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Now, maybe playing into this was that very early on, the West Des Moines PD was adamant that Johnny had run away. And so I think Gibbs, as anybody would feel if they were confronted with this type of situation, the Gosches knew that if they wanted to find their son, they had to do it by themselves. So they went door to door in West Des Moines, asking everyone if they'd seen anything suspicious. The couple spoke to everyone who had collected papers from the paper drop that morning. According to the Quad City Times, 16-year-old paperboy Mike Seskis told Noreen he saw a man in a 1979 to 1981 two-door blue Ford Fairmont near the paper drop talking to Johnny. The car was sitting still, but the man, who was wearing a baseball cap, sat on the passenger side with the door open. This kid said that Johnny was on the street and the driver flicked the light inside the car on and off 3 times before suddenly driving away.
Almost like signaling somebody.
Yeah, that seems like a signal, because as Johnny then walked north to start his route, this kid noticed another man following Johnny on foot. So I do agree with you that it seems like a signal. It also seems as though it was a very ominous signal.
Yeah.
Johnny Rossi, who went to the paper drop to pick up newspapers for his own children's paper route, told police he saw a man in a blue Ford Mercury talking to Johnny near the corner of 42nd Street and Ashworth Road. Rossi felt something was off about the situation. He thought the driver was around his mid-30s, that he weighed about 200 pounds, had dark hair, and a dark complexion. When Rossi checked in with Johnny to make sure that everything was okay, Johnny told him the driver had asked for directions to 86th Street. Rossi thought it was pretty odd that the driver sped away as soon as he got the directions. According to the Des Moines Register, Rossi noted the license plate was from Warren County, but he couldn't remember the plate number, despite later undergoing hypnosis. CNN reported that after the car sped off, witnesses saw it make a U-turn. Johnny continued on his route up to Marquardt Lane and 42nd Street near Valley High School. A neighbor heard a door slam and saw what he described near Johnny's red wagon as a silver Fairmont, which then sped away. It's believed that when this car pulled over, Johnny was pulled into the car and driven away. So we've got some eyewitness statements here. I don't think any of them are conclusive. Nobody saw anyone take Johnny. What they saw was a series of cars, some of them acting suspiciously.
Yeah.
And, you know, the 3 lights that we kind of termed to be a signal. Then all of a sudden a man's following Johnny. Now you've got this silver Fairmont. John and Noreen arranged for searches consisting of neighborhood and community volunteers. Despite searching everywhere they could, though, there was no sign of Johnny. The Gosches also made media appeals and printed flyers to get news out there about their son's case. 4 days after Johnny went missing, a $5,000 reward was announced by the Des Moines Register. I mean, after 4 days, Gibbs, as a parent, you're frantic, you're desperate. John and Noreen hired private investigators to try to make some headway.
Yeah, and you can't really blame them. From some of the articles I read, there was definitely some headbutting between the family and the police.
Well, we said it, right? The police felt as though Johnny had run away. Okay, well, how long did they think that? They weren't going to search or do anything for 72 hours anyway. You have to imagine that the parents thought, you know, like I said, if we're going to find our son, we're on our own.
Right.
The police are not doing all that much to help us out. And that's where you would hire some private investigators.
And I think we both would do the same.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you get a great rate on car insurance even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side so you choose a rate and coverages that work for you. So let's say you're interested in lowering your rate on your car insurance. Visit Progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and easy to compare, so that all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you. You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future, more money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that could make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. American Hostage is a new podcast starring John Hamm that tells the true story of Tony Kiritsis, who channeled the rage of a nation and took justice into his own hands. On a cold February morning in Indianapolis, Tony woke up, got dressed, loaded his sawed-off shotgun, and drove to his bank. Tony wasn't there to steal anything. He was there to take his life back. After entering, he quickly found his investment banker and wired the muzzle of his shotgun to the back of the man's head. Tony's plan was so well calculated that for the next 63 hours, the Indianapolis Police Department couldn't stop it. His plan was so outrageous and potentially catastrophic that the entire nation couldn't look away. And as the nation watched live, Tony became a hero to millions. This is a fascinating story. You've got to check out this podcast. John Hamm is amazing. Follow American Hostage wherever you get your podcasts, or you can binge all 8 episodes right now on Amazon Music and through Wondery Plus. The Sioux City Journal reported that the couple held garage sales and drove around Iowa selling candy bars and buttons with Johnny's picture to raise money to help pay the investigators. They had some volunteers willing to help, but the local police department criticized the couple openly, saying basically that they were troublemakers. They were getting in the way of the police.
Well, if they felt the police weren't doing their jobs, they're going to hire people that they feel will help them. They're trying to find their kid.
Well, obviously, police are going to get into it eventually.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as quick as any of us would have hoped. It obviously wasn't as quick as the parents would have hoped. Police later told the Des Moines Register that they believed Johnny had been kidnapped, but that they had hit a brick wall when it came to a possible motive. According to KCCI 8 News, despite police and volunteers searching everywhere for Johnny in the days and weeks following his disappearance, little evidence turned up. And I think this is exactly the problem, Gibbs, with, the kind of old time mandatory, whether it was 48 hours or 72 hours, where we're not going to do anything. Okay, well, how much time and evidence and witnesses and all of this are you losing in that 24, 48 hour, 72 hour period?
I think in a lot of cases, you're missing a big chunk.
In October 1982, according to the Gainesville Sun, then President Ronald Reagan signed into law the requirement for the details of all missing children to be recorded in the FBI's National Electronic System. Composite sketches of a man believed to be involved in Johnny's disappearance were released to the public. The subject of the drawings had a mustache, and in one of them, he wore a cap.
It's 1980, mustache.
Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, a lot of guys wore mustaches.
Pretty popular.
Obviously, Gibbs, John, and Noreen were doing what they could to raise awareness. Noreen pretty quickly established the Johnny Gosch Foundation. She traveled all over the country, holding speaking engagements, educating the public about how vulnerable children were to abduction by sexual predators, which was what she believed early on had happened to Johnny. Periodic alleged sightings of Johnny continued. According to the LA Times, 6 months after he disappeared, Noreen claimed her son was seen in Oklahoma. A woman reported that a boy called out to her that he was Johnny before being shoved into a car by two men. According to CNN, within 2 years of Johnny's disappearance, there were 12 separate sightings of him in Texas alone.
You know, when kids go missing or just people go missing, there's a lot of people that feel like they see that person. So I'm not surprised by
the number of sightings.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do think that deep down, people want to help. I truly believe that.
Right.
I've said it before. I believe that, the majority of people are good. Obviously, there are some that are evil, but deep down, people really want to help, especially when it comes to children. And so if they see somebody that even remotely looks like a missing child, they're going to call it in. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, obviously, those leads have to be checked out and there's time involved in that. But wouldn't you rather have that? If you're the parent of a missing child, you'd want everyone to call in. If it turns out not to be correct, okay, we're in no different of a situation than we were before. But it could be that one person who actually, let's say sees Johnny and decides, well, I don't know if it's him or not. I'm not going to bother the authorities. Boy, you really don't want that to happen.
Yeah, you'd rather them err the other way.
Oh, absolutely. By June 1984, the Gosches were still working hard to find their son when a local private investigator named Sam Soda contacted Noreen. Sam wasn't hired by the Gosches, but had a level of interest in the case, which some people, Gibbs, later would regard as suspicious. And that often happens.
Sure does.
Now, again, going back to my most people are good theory, it could just be that this individual wanted to help, but there's a natural inclination, I think, by many to look at things like this as being suspicious. Why are you offering to help? I think people view something like this differently than they do the volunteers from the community.
Right.
Coming out. Everybody understands why they would want to help. But a private investigator, offering up time and all of that can sometimes be seen as suspicious.
Yeah. Unless they're trying to make a name for themselves, right? Let's talk about his name, Sam Soda. Talking about a name for PI.
Yeah. It's almost like a B grade movie actor or character. Sam told Noreen an informant had advised him that another paperboy would be kidnapped that August by the same people who had taken Johnny. Like Noreen, Sam was a strong advocate for educating the public about child sex predators. Gibbs, in his public seminars, he went so far as to show images of child abuse material.
Graphic,
which, okay, I can't get on board with that, but there's no doubt that would have scared the you-know-what out of any parent in the audience. I don't think it's worth it to show that type of material, but
I don't think so either. I think, I know you're trying to put out awareness, but just talk about it.
But I do think it's important to consider the context of, what was occurring during that time. Stranger abductions were relatively uncommon, but there had been a succession of high-profile child kidnappings and murders around the country in the late 70s into the early 80s, and that's what really fueled panic among parents about stranger danger. And you had these conspiracy theories that started to develop about child sex trafficking rings being all over the place. Now, we know that those things do exist, but I think what happened during that time frame is people started to think they were everywhere.
Yeah, I think people started to believe that they were much more prevalent than what they were.
Gibbs, going back to him showing this kind of child abuse material, that obviously would never happen today. But the one thing that I think it did do was it caused people to question how he even acquired some of this content that he was showing.
That's a good point.
On August 12th of 1984, exactly as Sam had said, another paperboy disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. 14-year-old Eugene Martin went missing while on his paper route delivering the Des Moines Register. According to the Lewiston Daily Sun, the big difference with Eugene's disappearance was that police immediately got to work trying to find him. The newspaper announced an increased $25,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of either Johnny or Eugene. Local businesses chipped in along with friends and family of the missing boys, bringing the total reward to $94,000.
Which is a lot of money, especially in 1984.
Yeah, how much do you think that would be today?
Oh, man.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop.
$492. $1,000.
So deflation has occurred.
Yeah.
$492.
$1,000.
You could be right there. You could be right there. According to the website iowacoldcases.org, a local trucking company erected posters of the boys' photos on the sides of their trucks to increase exposure.
You know, that's a great thing.
And we just covered an unsolved case. I can't remember exactly which one it was, where a trucking company did, a similar thing. Noreen's persistence and hard work were instrumental in drafting legislation that passed in Iowa in August 1984. The Johnny Gosch law was also passed in 8 other states, and it mandated immediate police involvement as soon as a child was reported missing instead of the 72-hour waiting period.
What a great law.
Well, it's a great law, but I think, what always happens is we look at these things and say, why did it take this to make that happen? Who couldn't have thought that a 12-year-old boy, an 11-year-old girl being reported missing should be something that should be looked at right away?
Right.
You would think, okay, it took until 1984 for us to figure that out and for it to go into law. And then even then, it wasn't even adopted by, all states.
Exactly. Yeah.
According to the Associated Press, that same month, Noreen testified in Washington, D.C. at Senate hearings on the role of high-level organized crime in orchestrating child sex trafficking. Her pleas for increased community awareness led to the government pledging $10 million to establish the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this was huge. I mean, we've done so many cases. And how many times does the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children come up? In September of 1984, following Eugene's family reaching out to Anderson and Erickson Dairy, Johnny and Eugene's photos and information and other missing children appeared on milk cartons across the country. Despite the increased publicity, NBC News reported that police couldn't make any connection between the disappearances of Johnny and Eugene.
We talked about how great that was that they would do that on the milk cartons. I read an article while researching this case that all those milk cartons with pictures of missing people on it never resulted in actually finding somebody. And I thought that was really disappointing.
Not a single person?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But still, it's about keeping things out in the public, keeping awareness. If it didn't solve a case, maybe it helped in some indirect way.
Yeah. It was not a bad idea, even if it didn't work. You just love to see that people are taking the initiative. They're trying something different.
Yeah.
You got to give it up to people like that.
Sure.
But I want to go back to police not being able to make a connection between the disappearances of Johnny and Eugene. Well, there's one obvious connection. You had 2 young paper boys delivering the Des Moines Register. I'm assuming they're saying beyond that connection.
Yeah, because that's a big connection.
To me, it is. Then in 1985, Noreen received a letter out of the blue. It was really the first lead to offer some real hope. The writer explained that they were a member of a motorcycle club that had abducted Johnny. According to the New York Times, the writer claimed Johnny was alive, but had been sold into a large child sex trafficking ring and was now being held by a prominent drug dealer in Mexico City. The writer informed the Gosches that if they sent him $11,000, he would go to Mexico to rescue Johnny. The letter was signed Samuel Forbes, Dakota. Now you have to think about the state that John and Noreen are in.
Sure.
Emotionally, mental health wise, it couldn't have been good. Their son had been missing for almost 3 years, or around 3 years at this point. They believed that the letter was genuine. My thought, Gibbs, is that they really wanted to believe.
I think so, yeah.
Because, like I said, it really was kind of the first real lead or tip that they'd had. So they sent checks totaling $11,000 to this person. But the mystery writer later responded saying he could not retrieve Johnny. So that had to have been devastating for the Gosches. When police tracked down the writer, they found that he was a 19-year-old named Robert Herman Meyer from Saginaw, Michigan. He was a scammer, Gibbs.
It's a shame that these people do things like that.
It's unbelievable. You know, we got a lot of scams going on now. The scam of, okay, I'll shut down your computer if you don't send me $500 in gift cards.
Right.
That's a huge scam that's going on. That's horrible. I don't like it. But to specifically prey on the family of a missing child, you're taking it to a whole different level. Is deplorable. Meyer, the scammer, was arrested by the FBI at the Canadian-New York state border and charged with federal wire fraud. According to the Associated Press, even though Robert had defrauded John and Noreen, the Gosches were unhappy with the conduct of the FBI. Basically, they wanted Johnny's abductors to know they were prepared to pay a ransom to get him back. And for some reason, they felt that the way the FBI handled the arrest of this 19-year-old guy meant that that hope was gone. I'm not sure exactly how they came to that conclusion. But again, you have a couple who was probably in a very fragile mental state.
Yeah, and this was like their first bit of hope that went sour.
And it was almost like they thought there was a link, there was a line to Johnny, and now that line had been cut, even though there really wasn't there. In mid-1985, another tip came in. According to the UPI, a Sioux City woman was counting her change after visiting her local grocery store when she saw a dollar bill had been scrawled with the words, "I am alive, Johnny Gosch." The woman sent the bill to the Gosches. When they had it analyzed, handwriting experts informed them that, in their opinion, Johnny had indeed written the message. The Gosches offered a cash reward for the safe return of their son, but nothing materialized out of this. Then in August 1986, a 36-year-old man was arrested by the FBI after attempting to extort $2,500 from the Gosches. The man alleged Johnny was in Mexico and promised to hand over details to the Gosches in return for the cash. So here, Gibbs, you have yet another scumbag trying to, make some money off of what is really a tragic situation.
Yeah, they just come out of the woodwork, man.
Yeah, it's really sad. But then in 1989, a break came that gave Noreen some real hope. According to the Des Moines Register, 20-year-old Paul Bonazzi came forward claiming child sex traffickers had abducted both him and Johnny to produce child abuse material. Paul stated that as a 14-year-old, he participated in Johnny's kidnapping under pressure. The Cedar Rapids Gazette reported Paul had since been convicted of sexually assaulting 3 boys and was doing prison time in Lincoln, Nebraska. Noreen met with Paul, who explained that on the day in question, he was hiding in the backseat of the car, which had taken Johnny. Paul said he chloroformed Johnny before the paperboy was transferred to a van, taken to Sioux City, and then on to Nebraska. Paul also claimed he'd seen Johnny in 1986 in Colorado, where he was kept in the basement of a house later featured on America's Most Wanted. Paul went on to say that Johnny had been renamed Mark, dyed his hair black, and was allegedly taken out of the country and flown to somewhere around the Netherlands. When Noreen arranged for her investigator to show Paul a photo of a man she'd received who was supposedly involved in her son's abduction, Paul immediately identified the man as someone named Emilio. Paul claimed that Emilio visited him at a motel the night before the abduction with a photo of Johnny, instructing Paul that he was going to help in the kidnapping. Noreen told the police of this development, telling them Paul also knew details about Johnny, which weren't public, but she has said that the police weren't interested in anything she had to say. According to the 2014 documentary, Who Took Johnny?, Paul's siblings told police their brother was at home in Omaha when Johnny went missing. Detectives refused to interview Paul because they just were uncertain about his credibility. According to the Des Moines Register, one of the reasons was said to be Paul's diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, what used to be called multiple personality disorder, which in his case affected the reliability of his allegations and credibility as a potential witness.
But if what he's saying is actually true, it's a game changer.
Well, it is. And I get the fact that maybe a defense attorney would try to tear him up on the stand. I get that. I understand that. But does that mean that, the police shouldn't talk to him, shouldn't try to run down some of the things that he's saying, and then corroborate it for themselves? Gibbs, as with many couples of kids who go missing, the strain of Johnny's disappearance took its toll on John and Noreen's marriage, and they divorced in 1993. We've seen it happen time and time again. It's such a life-altering event that, many marriages just can't hold up under that type of strain.
Yeah, just marriage in general can be tough.
Sure.
So add that on top of it.
CBD is great. You've heard me talk about it for a number of years now. I use it. My wife uses it. But I recently found out that there are other beneficial cannabinoids out there like CBN. CBN can give you an amazing night of sleep. So CBD, CBN, there are so many benefits that you really need to check some of this stuff out. Well, jacbd.com has all those things and more. They have delicious CBD gummies, which are great for calming the mind and reducing anxiety. They have nighttime gummies utilizing CBN and melatonin to give you a great sleep. These things will knock you out better than NyQuil or Benadryl ever could. They have tinctures you can put in your morning coffee to reduce the jitters. So what I'm saying, folks, is they have everything, and you can save 20% off with the code TCAT at jacbd.com. Go to jacbd.com, 5 letters, JACBD. Use promo code TCAT to save 20% off store-wide. Support Johnny Apple CBD and support the show. Hey folks, can we talk about health for a minute? Because there's nothing more important than taking care of yourself. Because if you're not feeling your best, you can't be your best. Sambucol helps you feel your best by supporting your immune system with premium black elderberry. Sambucol is the original black elderberry brand, so I know I'm getting immune support I can trust. I use Sambucol because I don't have time to miss work when I'm not feeling my best. These podcasts have to go out. So I take 1 or 2 Sambucol gummies every morning to help make sure I can keep doing what I need to do. And I love these gummies because they taste so good. They're like a little morning treat. I take them with my coffee to get my day started off right. They also have a ton of other formats to choose from, including syrups, drink powders, tablets, capsules, and more. They also have products for kids and babies as well. You can help support your entire family's immune systems with Sambucol. Get 15% off your next order of $9.99 or more at sambucolusa.com. Use code TCAT. That's 15% off your next order of $9.99 or more with the code TCAT. It wasn't until 2:30 a.m. on a March morning in 1997 when another stunning development emerged. Noreen answered a knock at her apartment door. She opened it to see a 27-year-old man she was adamant was Johnny, who was in the company of another man. According to USA Today, Noreen claimed Johnny told her he'd escaped from a group of child sex traffickers who had abducted him back in 1982. Fearing for his life and keeping a low profile, he told her he couldn't return home, but he wanted to visit. Noreen later said Johnny wouldn't talk about where he was living, but he showed her the birthmark on his chest as proof of his identity, even though his long hair was dyed black. Incredibly, Noreen kept news of the visit to herself for a couple of years. She didn't even tell her ex-husband.
Yeah, I'd be really upset about that, you know? I'd be really upset that if my missing son showed up at my ex's front door and you didn't want to tell me and didn't tell me for 2 years.
Yeah, he didn't find out for 2 years. And the way that he found out was kind of interesting. According to the Charlie Project, Noreen was testifying at a child sexual abuse trial in Nebraska in 1999. I guess she was some type of expert witness. And she told the story about Johnny visiting her at her apartment. According to the Globe Gazette, the jury was skeptical about whether or not it was Johnny who visited Noreen. I think John Sr. was as well. But there's no doubt, Gibbs, that Noreen's revelation only added more intrigue and speculation to the case. And how could it not? Right? Her son's been missing for years.
Yeah.
And now, 15 years later, he just shows up at the door, visits, but says he can't stay, and he's gone.
Very mysterious.
In late summer 2006, Noreen found an envelope at her front door. When she looked inside, she found photographs of boys who had been bound and gagged, including one boy that she recognized as Johnny. According to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Noreen claimed that another photo of a man depicted someone she believes to be involved in her son's kidnapping. And we've already had some nasty pranks. If you even want to call, I don't even call them pranks, right, Gibbs? What's been done to them already, I call them criminal acts.
Oh, yeah.
Heinous.
Yeah.
They're extortion, things like that.
Sickening.
So I think probably most people wondered, was this something along those lines? I don't think Noreen thought that. I think she thought, these were the real deal. One of the boys in the pictures was Johnny. The same newspaper reported that on September 13th, the West Des Moines PD received an anonymous letter that read, "Gentlemen, someone has played a reprehensible joke on a grieving mother. The photo in question is not one of her sons, but 3 boys in Tampa, Florida, about 1979 to 1980, challenging each other to an escape contest." And apparently, Gibbs, there was an investigation concerning that picture made by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in Florida. No charges were filed and no wrongdoing was established. This allegation should be easy enough to check out. Now, Noreen believed the photos were genuine pictures taken of Johnny, but according to the Charlie Project and NBC News, police were quick to shut this possibility down. And Gibbs, to be honest with you, I can't blame her at all for, thinking that one of the boys in these pictures was Johnny, hoping one of these boys in the pictures was Johnny.
Sure, yeah.
Now, I think people listening will have differing thoughts on it. Some people might think, well, as a mother, you know what your son looks like. But as a grieving mother who lost your son, I think you're holding out hope even when the hope isn't really there, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
So police obviously did check with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, and they confirmed to KCCI 8 News that the letter was accurate, but the photos were investigated around 1978, 1979. The lead detective explained there was no evidence. A crime had been committed, and the boys involved had voluntarily participated. However, only a few weeks after Noreen received the photos, the Des Moines Register reported that Hillsborough County was unable to provide any proof that one of the alleged pictures of Johnny was the same one from the Hillsborough County investigation, or that police there had even investigated the original photos at all. Police also confirmed that the photos had been publicly available on a website featuring child abuse material. Now, according to the documentary Who Took Johnny, the boy in the photo Noreen claimed was her son was never identified, despite all of the other boys in the photos being tracked down. In 2007, the West Des Moines PD requested a sample of John Sr.'s DNA in the event Johnny was located after his father's death. Over the years, Noreen and John Sr. have endured unimaginable turmoil, and we talked about them being targeted by fraudsters, scammers. They've also been inundated by psychics and crank callers who have inflicted even more pain on the already suffering family. They've also received death threats and been the victim of conspiracy theorists who claim that the Gosches have concocted the entire story.
Not surprised there, right? That you have those type of people coming out, making those claims. Of course, we know about the scammers. As this case remains unsolved with no answers, people are going to come up with their own judgment on what happened, make their own conclusion.
And sometimes that involves people pointing the finger back at the victim's family. It happens quite a bit. So Gibbs, let's talk about some theories. We've talked about some, right, involving child sex trafficking and things like that. The one thing I would say is that I think it's doubtful that Johnny just ran away, as police first thought. He enjoyed his job. He loved his family. He was looking forward to starting junior high. And on the day he disappeared, he was looking forward to taking his best friend on a family trip to the lake after finishing his paper route. According to the Des Moines Register, he'd also left his wallet in his room, and no one accessed his bank account. So, he was a 12-year-old kid. Could a 12-year-old run away and start a new life? I guess it's possible. Is it likely?
Doubtful.
No. It's doubtful. Where would they get the money? How would they live? How would they, survive? Then we have Noreen's theory, which remains a pretty popular one. That is Johnny being abducted by a sophisticated ring of child sex traffickers. We've heard about Paul Benassi, who has consistently maintained his stories over the years and nominated a man named Emilio, who has never been identified. This theory took on a life of its own during a series of investigations in 1988 into the Franklin Credit Union based in Omaha and its manager, Lawrence King. What started as inquiries into financial crime quickly morphed into allegations of child sex trafficking on a national scale, but these couldn't be substantiated. The current police position is that there's no evidence suggesting Johnny was abducted and held captive by a national child sex trafficking ring, nor do investigators believe there is any evidence to suggest Johnny is alive. John Sr. doesn't believe there is any truth to the story put forth by Paul Benassi. Some people have raised the question of whether the private investigator Sam Soda could have been involved at a local level. You know, he did have this kind of preemptive information. Gibbs on the abduction of Eugene Martin. You know, Noreen didn't engage Sam. As an investigator, he approached her. We don't know where he got his information, foreshadowing Martin's abduction. But again, there's really nothing to suggest he was involved in either case. He did have some very unorthodox methods in educating the community about child sex trafficking. That's probably a euphemism, you know, using child abuse type material as an education tool is probably a little bit more than unorthodox.
Right. Yeah. I did find it strange that he knew something was going to happen very soon with another paperboy.
Well, I found it strange too. And I think that, you know, conspiracy theorists or some people point to that as proof that, okay, maybe he was involved, or at the very least, he had knowledge of maybe both of the abductions. There's another theory that was covered extensively by season 1 of the Faded Out podcast. Filmmaker Sarah DeMeo explored various angles of Johnny's case. In 2016, an anonymous former registered paperboy came forward with information, posting comments on Johnny's page on the Iowa Cold Cases website under the username Yellowbag, after the yellow bags that the paperboys would carry. Yellowbag claimed that on his paper route as a 15-year-old, he was approached by a man in a vehicle in the months before Johnny's disappearance. He spoke to the Faded Out podcast, and Yellowbag alleged that 2 former employees of the Register could have been involved. Now, you might say this sounds far-fetched, but then you have to look at the men's criminal records, and it does give a little bit of cause for concern. According to the Des Moines Register, in 1985 and 1986, 37-year-old Register employee Frank Sikora confessed to sexually abusing numerous paperboys. Police claim to have eliminated him early on in Johnny's case by polygraph. And you know, Gibbs, we talk about polygraphs, I'm always leery.
Sure.
When someone is eliminated solely based off of a polygraph test. Yellowbag also named a circulation manager named Wilbur Millhouse, who was convicted in 1987 of child abuse offenses. The Des Moines Register reported that when police searched Wilbur's house, they found suspicious lists with the names and phone numbers of 2,000 boys.
Wow.
What's even more damning is that Yellowbag saw Wilbur in the company of one of the men who approached him on his paper route. At the time, Yellowbag told police of his near misses and suspicions, but no action was taken. Okay, that does seem to be a similar refrain that we keep hearing.
We do.
Police are told, no action is taken.
Yep.
Now, I do sometimes wonder when people say no action was taken, how do they know for sure? How do they know police didn't look into it and they didn't find anything, but that was never communicated?
Right.
So I don't know.
Maybe they were hoping for some type of arrest.
Yes.
And there was nothing there to make an arrest.
Yeah, we don't know. Unfortunately, no further inquiries can be made with Wilbur or Frank because they died in 2015 and 2020, respectively. Private investigator Sam Soda is also no longer alive to shed light on this possible local connection. He passed away in 2020. Gibbs has really been no meaningful developments in recent years. Noreen hasn't had any more contact from her son since the reported visit in 1997, but obviously she continues to hope that one day she'll get the answers to what happened to Johnny. In 2017, Noreen took possession of a special memento to remind her of her son, the red newspaper wagon found abandoned the day Johnny went missing. According to the Des Moines Register, the FBI has released very little on the investigation to date, given that Johnny is still classified as a missing person. At the time of his disappearance, Johnny was around 5'7" and he weighed about 140 pounds. He had light brown hair and blue eyes, facial freckles, a gap between his front teeth, a birthmark on his left cheek, as well as on the left side of his chest, and a horseshoe-shaped scar on his tongue. Johnny was last seen wearing a white sweatshirt with Kim's Academy printed on the back, black sweatpants or cut-off jeans, and blue rubber flip-flop sandals. If Johnny is alive today, he would be 52 years old. If you have any information on the disappearance of Johnny Gosch, you can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST or the West Des Moines PD at 1-515-223-3211. So, Gibbs, as we wrap up this case, I mean, obviously there's a lot going on. It's part of why this is such an infamous unsolved case.
Right.
Not only do you have the disappearance of a 12-year-old boy, you really have a lot of allegations of child sex trafficking. You know, I did think that the interview by this former paperboy with the Faded Out podcast was interesting.
I did too.
You know, possibly implicating some men convicted of child sexual abuse type crimes in Johnny's disappearance. And then, you know, I really think you have to look at Noreen and John. You know, their marriage couldn't survive, which is not unusual in cases like this. But I think a lot of people online really focus on Noreen. You know, Noreen has been working for a long time, trying to do some good things.
Sure.
Not only to find her son, but to help others. But at the same time, she's had a lot of very strange things happen to her, or she's claimed that strange things have happened to her. You know, Johnny coming to visit her, seeing him in the photographs. Okay. Some people online are very critical of her and the way that, you know, she's handled certain things. You know, I don't think there's any doubt that she and her husband feel like the police didn't do them any favors by starting as late as they did and, you know, not really taking them seriously.
Yeah, I don't know how you couldn't be bitter towards the police at that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't start when they wanted them to start. You would always think, you know what, if you would have investigated this when we called you and started right away, maybe you would have found him. Maybe we wouldn't have went through what we've gone through these last years of not having our son.
And then you throw in Paul Benassi, Sam Soda. There's so many kind of fascinating characters in this story. I think it's one of the main reasons why, you know, this case has grabbed a lot of the armchair detectives.
Sure.
Because there's a lot going on.
A lot of twist.
You know, Eugene Martin disappearing, you know, a couple of years after Johnny.
Yeah.
He's a paper boy.
Yeah.
And you have these pedophiles, or at the very least, people who were convicted of pretty nasty child abuse crimes.
Yeah.
Who were paper guys.
So
is that a coincidence? Is Yellow Bag right? I don't know. You know, at the end of the day, we don't know the answers. Maybe someday the truth will all come out. I think what intrigues me most about this story, though, is Noreen. Is this a woman who just so desperately wants to see her son in photos, in person? Did Johnny really come visit her, or did she somehow dream that and it became a reality? I don't know the answer to that. I don't want to call this woman a liar at all.
She wants her son.
Absolutely. And we all would.
Of course, yeah.
But that's it for our episode on the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. I just sent you that email that I've been meaning to send you. Those are the chickens. They have to listen to you guys too sometimes, so I'm sure they're just saying thank you. just wanted to say you guys are still doing great. I get to listen to you guys 40 hours every weekend while I drive around and do my own work. And you guys keep me safe all the time. Just keep your guys safe, too, or keep yourselves safe, too. Don't let anything happen to you, because we'd all be crying, I'm sure. All right. Have a good one, guys. And chickens say bye, and keep your head on the swivel. And so do I. Have a good one. Bye.
Good old chickens.
Yeah, we always love to hear the chickens. And it cracks me up because when she emails, she always says chicken lady.
Chicken
she
lady?
calls herself chicken lady.
Chicken lady.
But it cracks me up.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. It's Carrie from Colorado calling. I had an idea. First of all, I'm listening to all of the old Unsolved, and you guys mentioned when you had done When the Reviews Are In podcast. And it got me thinking, there are so many international listeners and so many requests for international cases. It seems only logical that for those of us who can't get enough TCAT, we branch off into not just TCAT and TCAT Unsolved, but TCAT International. Give it a think. I got the dogs all leashed up, and we're about to sally forth. Got another good episode of TCAT Unsolved queued up. Thanks for all you do. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Yeah, you never know. TCAT International could be a thing. You know, Gibby and I have thought about doing some other stuff. And then it's like, okay, at the end of the week in, week out, how did we get through all the podcasts that we just did?
Yeah.
The thought of, trying to do another one with the research and the writing and the editing is a little daunting, but you never know.
And the good thing is I'm very versed in many languages.
So we got that going for us.
Yeah, I'm multilingual.
Did you try to do a strange accent at the end?
Do I need to?
But I think you did.
I'm multilingual.
Okay.
Hey, Gib. Hey, Ferg. This is Mylene from Minnesota. I've been listening for about 8 months, and I just finished all of your TCAT Solved. So now I'm trying to work my way over to your Unsolved section, which is a little bit more difficult for me because it just bugs me that they're not solved. Like, I want to just get out there and do it myself, but adult responsibilities, whatever. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm such a huge supporter of your show, and I listen to you guys all day, every day. I'm a professional cleaner, so I always have you guys in my ear, and I wish you guys would put out more in a week, but I get that you guys have family and things to do also. But if you are looking for somebody to come help, I'm more than available. Thanks. Have a great day and keep your own time ticking.
All right. Love it. I could almost say the same thing I just said for the last call.
You absolutely, yeah, just say ditto.
Ditto. I mean, could we put out more? Maybe.
Yeah.
But my biggest concern is that the shows would suffer because we'd be rushing and we just wouldn't have enough time to devote to them. But you never know. You never know what will happen in the future. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Stream the biggest movies and TV shows for free on Pluto TV. Watch movies like Titanic and G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, plus TV shows like CSI and Star Trek: The Next Generation. Starting this month, check out the 24/7 Stargate channel exclusively on Pluto TV. Plus hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows absolutely free. Download the free Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start watching today.